Family is paramount, my brother-in-law proclaimed as he took over my enterprise. Don't be egocentric, everyone admonished. I turned and left. 1 week later, my phone began ringing incessantly with anxious calls. Family is paramount, my brother-in-law proclaimed as he took over my enterprise. Don't be egocentric, everyone admonished. I turned and left. 1 week later, my phone began ringing incessantly with anxious calls. I remember that day vividly. The sharp sting of betrayal cutting through the fog of my morning coffee as I walked away from a life I had built brick by brick. The voice of my brother-in-law, smooth and insincere, echoed in my mind as I stepped away from an empire that had once represented my blood, sweat, and dreams, a legacy now tarnished by ambition and deceit. In the days that followed, I wandered through a haze of disbelief and regret. I had nurtured that enterprise like a child, investing every ounce of hope and determination into it, only to see it usurped by someone who wore the mask of kinship. The hollowness of that betrayal gnawed at me, turning familiar memories into bitter reminders of trust misplaced. My solitude became a confessional, a space where I questioned every whispered promise and every half-smile shared in the boardroom. Why had they chosen this moment to seize control? Was the call of family merely a convenient guise for an insidious plan, or was there something even darker lurking beneath the surface? The incessant ringing of my phone provided a constant, unwelcome reminder that my past was not done with me yet. It began on a stormy night, the kind when rain lashes at the windows like a chorus of mournful voices. I answered reluctantly, expecting an empty message or perhaps a misguided apology, but instead a distorted, trembling voice spoke. You must come back. There are secrets hidden in the halls of your enterprise, secrets that could destroy us all. Those words, half swallowed by static, resonated deep within me, stirring long-dormant suspicions and fears. I hung up, the echo of that message trailing behind me like a specter, and tried to bury the unease under layers of distraction and disbelief. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night, I lay awake, replaying memories of late meetings filled with half-truths and knowing glances. I recalled the day my brother-in-law first hinted at his ambitions, how his eyes flickered with a light that I once mistook for confidence, but now recognized as greed. His takeover had been swift, almost surgical, leaving no room for protest or explanation. Colleagues exchanged pained looks, and even the most loyal employees seemed to shrink away, as if acknowledging an unspoken truth that I had chosen to ignore. It wasn't just a corporate coup, it was a betrayal of the familial bond I had once believed unbreakable. Desperation soon took hold, and I found myself compelled to revisit the corridors of my former life. In the quiet hours of dawn, I began reaching out to those who had been my confidants in the early days of the company. A former employee, one who had witnessed the company's evolution from humble beginnings to a sprawling enterprise, spoke to me in hushed tones over a late-night phone call. Her voice trembled as she recounted secret meetings held in dimly lit rooms, whispered conversations about a project so clandestine that even the most trusted among us had only fragments of its true purpose. There were locked drawers and hidden files, she confided, her words laced with both fear and resignation. I always felt that something was off. Transactions that didn't add up, deals with names I'd never heard before. It was as if our enterprise was a front for something far more insidious. Each word she uttered deepened the labyrinth of questions I was desperate to solve. Compelled by a mounting sense of urgency, I scoured the dusty corners of my memory and the neglected archives of our old records. In the abandoned basement of our former headquarters, I discovered files that hinted at financial irregularities, cryptic references to offshore accounts, and unexplained transfers of vast sums. The documents, yellowed by time and marred by the fingerprints of those who had handled them in secret, painted a picture of a carefully orchestrated scheme, one that went far beyond a mere family feud. My heart pounded as I realized that the enterprise I had devoted my life to was entangled in a web of corruption and hidden alliances, its true purpose obscured by layers of corporate rhetoric and family loyalty. The phone calls grew more frequent and increasingly urgent. One particularly haunting call came in the dead of night, its timing as precise as it was unsettling. The voice, now less distorted and brimming with a desperation I had never heard before, said, "If you value the truth, come to the old warehouse on Mill Street. There you'll find what they've been hiding." The brevity of the message belied its gravity. The warehouse had long been abandoned, a relic from a bygone era when our company was more than just a business, when it was a beacon of hope and innovation. Now it loomed as a silent monument to all that had been lost, its broken windows and crumbling facade a testament to the decay of trust and honor. I found myself teetering on the edge of a decision that could either redeem or damn me. Part of me screamed to remain in the safety of ignorance, to let the past lie buried beneath the rubble of betrayal. Yet another, more insistent part of me, driven by the need to reclaim the truth, pushed me towards the unknown. I began to discreetly reconnect with old allies, gathering snippets of information that, like scattered shards of glass, might someday form a complete picture. In clandestine meetings held in the shadowed corners of dimly lit cafes and back alleys, I listened to stories of late-night rendezvous, hushed whispers about unaccounted funds, and furtive glances exchanged between those who had once believed in the sanctity of our family bond. Every conversation, every document, every cryptic phone call intensified my determination to unmask the true nature of the conspiracy that had stolen not only my enterprise, but also the very essence of what I held dear. I began to understand that the betrayal was not an isolated incident, but part of a much larger scheme, a meticulously orchestrated plan where ambition, greed, and an insatiable hunger for power had conspired to upend the delicate balance of trust. As I pieced together the fragments of evidence, a disconcerting realization took root. The enterprise was merely the tip of an iceberg, a facade behind which dark forces had been amassing strength, ready to extend their reach far beyond the confines of our familial drama. One rainy evening, as I pored over faded financial statements and scattered meeting minutes in my cluttered study, the phone buzzed again, a sound that had become both a harbinger of dread and a call to arms. This time, the message was succinct yet loaded with urgency. "Be careful. They know you're coming." Those words, stark and unadorned, filled me with a renewed sense of purpose and a deep, unshakable apprehension. With trembling resolve, I decided it was time to confront the mystery head-on. I packed a small bag with the essentials, my laptop, a few documents that I couldn't afford to lose, and the phone that had become my unwelcome oracle, and set out into the night. The journey to the warehouse was shrouded in an atmosphere of palpable tension. The city, usually so vibrant and familiar, now appeared as a landscape of foreboding silhouettes and uncertain pathways. Every flickering street lamp, every murmur of the wind through narrow alleys served as a reminder that the world I once knew was slipping away, replaced by a realm where trust was a luxury and secrets were currency. As I drove, memories of better times, when laughter filled the corridors of our company and hope was the common language, mingled with the stark realization that the road ahead was fraught with dangers I had never imagined. Approaching Mill Street, the night seemed to close. In around me, every shadow a potential threat, every quiet moment a prelude to chaos. The warehouse emerged on the horizon like a phantom from a forgotten past, its decrepit structure silently beckoning me closer. I parked a short distance away and stepped out into the cool, damp air, my heart pounding in my ears as I made my way toward the building. The entrance, partially ajar as if left in haste, invited me into a realm where time had frozen, and every corner held a secret waiting to be unearthed. Inside, the darkness was almost tangible, a heavy, suffocating presence that pressed in from all sides. My flashlight beam danced across peeling walls and scattered remnants of a once thriving enterprise. Each step echoed in the vast emptiness, and with every footfall, I felt the weight of history and betrayal intertwine. I paused at the threshold of a narrow corridor, the silence punctuated only by the distant drip of water and the soft rustle of old papers. In that suspended moment, as I stood on the cusp of uncovering the truth, a chill ran down my spine. The Walls themselves seemed to murmur, as if beckoning me to listen to the stories of deceit and ambition that had been buried within these cold, unyielding structures. With trembling resolve, I reached for the door at the end of the corridor, where a faint light beckoned like a promise of answers. The moment my hand touched the cold metal of the doorknob, a voice from behind the darkness whispered my name, sending a shockwave of dread through my entire being. I froze, heart pounding, as that enigmatic sound faded into the oppressive silence, leaving me alone with my mounting questions and the overwhelming certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The whispered name echoed in the darkness as I slowly turned toward the source, a silhouette emerging from the inky black. I barely had time to register the figure before a chill ran down my spine, and I found myself compelled to follow. The figure moved with deliberate purpose, guiding me deeper into the labyrinthine heart of the warehouse. My pulse thundered in, my ears as each step revealed more of a forgotten past. A past rife with secrets and betrayals that had long been buried under layers of corporate pomp and familial loyalty. As we navigated twisting corridors, the figure finally halted before a heavy unmarked door. With a gesture that betrayed both urgency and sorrow, he pressed a hidden latch, revealing a narrow stairwell descending into a long-forgotten sub-basement. There, in the gloom, lay a room filled with scattered documents, faded photographs, and a bank of archaic computers that hummed as if guarding memories of an empire built on deception. I realized with mounting horror that this hidden archive held the truth of everything. Proof of financial misappropriations, encrypted correspondences hinting at clandestine meetings, and even names and faces I recognized from our past. He introduced himself simply as Marcus. Once a trusted insider, he had been forced into silence when his questions about irregularities in our company's books began to unravel a network of corruption that spanned continents. "I've been tracking this. For years," he confided in a hushed tone, his eyes reflecting both determination and regret. "Your brother-in-law's takeover wasn't just a family betrayal, it was the final move in a grand scheme orchestrated by someone known only as Ares. Everything we built was merely a front for something far more sinister." Marcus's words sank in as I rifled through the files. There were spreadsheets with baffling numbers, ledgers implicating powerful figures, and cryptic annotations scrawled in the margins. Every document painted a picture of a covert alliance, a coalition of corporate titans, politicians, and shadowy financiers whose aim was to control not just our enterprise, but markets and governments around the world. The magnitude of the conspiracy was overwhelming, and I felt the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. Before I could process further, a harsh metallic sound reverberated from above. Marcus's eyes widened as he muttered, "They know we're here." Without warning, the door at the top of the stairs burst open, and a contingent of men in dark suits flooded the corridor. Their faces were void of emotion, their mission clear: silence anyone who dared uncover the truth. Instinct took over. Marcus grabbed my arm, and together we bolted back into the maze-like corridors of the warehouse. The ensuing chase was a blur of adrenaline and fear. Every narrow passage, every hidden nook, became both a refuge and a trap. The pursuers moved with relentless precision, their footsteps echoing like a death knell in the abandoned building. Amid the frantic scramble for escape, we were joined by a woman who appeared as if conjured by fate. Introducing herself as Eliza, a former investigator with a knack for unearthing buried secrets, she guided us through obscure back alleys and forgotten service corridors. Her calm authority lent us hope in a situation where despair threatened to overtake every rational thought. At long last, we stumbled into a secure chamber, a makeshift command center that looked as if it had been frozen in time. Flickering monitors displayed grainy images from various parts of the building, and a wall of computer servers pulsed with data that chronicled the hidden operations of the conspirators. It was here that I encountered the true face of the deception. On one of the screens, a shadowed figure was referenced repeatedly by the codename Ares. The files confirmed what Marcus had warned me. Ares was the puppet master behind the network of corruption, the architect whose machinations had infiltrated every level of our enterprise. My brother-in-law's ruthless ambition was just a piece of the puzzle, a pawn sacrificed in a game where the stakes were far higher than personal gain. The realization was both crushing and galvanizing. In that claustrophobic room, surrounded by evidence of systemic treachery, I felt the burden of a destiny I had never imagined. The path forward was perilous, but it was clear. We had to expose this malignant force to the world. Marcus, Eliza, and I forged an unspoken pact to risk everything for the sake of the truth. Time was our enemy. As we began transferring the incriminating data to secure servers and drafting detailed accounts of our findings, the tension in the room was palpable. We knew that once our evidence reached the outside world, journalists, regulatory bodies, watchdog organizations, there would be no turning back. Every passing second increased the likelihood that our adversaries would close in. The lights above flickered ominously, as if warning us that our window of opportunity was rapidly diminishing. Suddenly, the room's door creaked open once more. A solitary figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, hands raised in a gesture that was almost conciliatory. It was my brother-in-law, his face a mask of conflicted resolve. His eyes darted between us, between the evidence, the determination in our eyes, and perhaps a glimmer of remorse. In that charged moment, the veneer of his earlier arrogance cracked, revealing the guilt and desperation beneath. "You have no idea what you're about to unleash," he rasped, his voice a mix of threat and sorrow. "Ares doesn't tolerate betrayal, not even from family." The tension escalated into a standoff, words hanging in the air like a fragile truce before inevitable chaos. I demanded answers. Why had he turned on everything we had built? His response was a hollow confession. He had been promised power and protection in exchange for his compliance, a promise that had ultimately led him to sacrifice our shared values. Yet even as he spoke, the footsteps of his cohorts grew louder, a reminder that time was running out. Before we could resolve the confrontation, the door slammed shut, and the room plunged into a tense silence broken only by the hum of the servers. In that brief pause, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in my brother-in-law's eyes, a silent acknowledgement that he, too, was trapped by the machinations of forces far greater than himself. The revelation sparked something in me, a determination to reclaim not only my enterprise, but the very principles of honesty and integrity that had been so callously discarded. Without warning, alarms began to blare, and the hidden command center was suddenly illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. Marcus barked orders as we scrambled to secure the data and ensure our transmissions were complete. Eliza's fingers flew over the keyboard as she encrypted and dispatched the evidence to a network of trusted contacts. In that frantic moment, I realized that we were not just fighting for our own survival, but for the soul of an entire system, built on deception. The chaos outside our temporary sanctuary intensified. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the building trembled under the weight of impending reckoning. It was as though the very fabric of the empire we had known was unraveling. With the evidence now streaming to the world, a palpable shift began to occur. The conspirators' iron grip was weakening as regulators and investigative journalists mobilized, their collective outrage a counterforce to the corruption we had exposed. In the ensuing tumult, I found myself standing face to face with the stark consequences of our rebellion. The warehouse, a symbol of my former life, was quickly swarmed by authorities. As my brother-in-law was escorted away in handcuffs, his vacant gaze spoke of a man who had lost everything in pursuit of empty ambitions. Marcus and Eliza, their expressions etched with both relief and lingering fear, assured me that the wheels of justice were finally in motion. In the quiet moments that followed, as I stepped out into the pale light of dawn, I was overwhelmed by a bittersweet clarity. The battle had been long and costly, and while the empire of deceit was crumbling, the scars of betrayal would remain etched in my memory. I had discovered that family, in its truest form, was not merely defined by shared blood or inherited legacy, but by the bonds of loyalty and trust forged in the crucible of adversity. As the city stirred awake and news of the scandal rippled, through every medium, I resolved to rebuild my life on a foundation of truth and resilience. The journey had transformed me irrevocably, from a betrayed entrepreneur to a reluctant guardian of justice. I had ventured into the heart of darkness and emerged with the painful yet empowering knowledge that even in a world rife with corruption, one person's courage could ignite a spark of change. Now, standing at the crossroads of what was lost and what might yet be salvaged, I carried with me not only the burden of the past, but also a newfound commitment to honor those who had sacrificed everything for the sake of truth. In the end, the secrets we unearthed in that forsaken warehouse were more than just evidence of a vast conspiracy. They were a testament to the enduring power of integrity and the unbreakable human spirit. And as the first rays of morning light chased away the lingering shadows of the night, I took a deep breath and stepped forward into a future where redemption, though hard won, was finally within reach.